Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about Java variable types. So when I say Java variable types, we are going to have three different types, right? One of them is instance variables, one of them is local variables, and the other one is static variables. We've been already working with the local variables, right? Because inside of the static void main, right? Public static void main, that's a method. Inside of the method, we've been like creating some variables, and those are actually local variables, right? Those are local variables. So let's get started and understand the instance variables first, and then I'm going to talk about the other rest too. Okay, so let's create instance variables. So first of all, we have to know that instance variables are supposed to be created in the class level, which means here, right? This is our class, and before the main method, you have to create your instance variables, right? Instance variables goes here on the class level. So we can create string, right? Let's say string name, right? Name, and give it a mic, right? Let's say we created one instance variables and we called it mic. So what can I do with these instance variables? Instance variables are actually belong to the object of the class. Whenever you create object of the class, you are going to be able to read these instance variables. If you don't create the object of the class, you're not going to be able to read instance variables, right? And call another one. Let's create another one equals, let's say 35, right? And the age is 35, right? Okay, so these are instance variables. Let's see if I'm going to be able to call them or not, right? I'm gonna show you that if I'm going to be able to call them inside of the same class, even in the same class, if I can call them or not. Okay, so first of all, instance variables, what I said is you have to create object of the class because instance variables belong to the object. Okay, so what is it? Name. Okay, name. Let's say I want to print out the name out, right? Name. Okay, what is it saying? Oh my god. So cannot make a static reference the non-static field name. I'm gonna talk about static, why we need static or why do we use static. But it's saying if you change it to actually static, you can raise it this way. I don't want it, right? I don't want it. I want to be able to call my instance variable. So this is why we need to create variables. Let's call v and new variable, right? Okay, we created object of the class, variable types in Java. Okay, now it's saying that, okay, now maybe there is a way that you can read them. Dot name. Okay, actually I'm able to reach it. All right, see, whenever we execute this code here, we are able to actually read the instance variables, right? Reads the instance variables. Oh, okay, so instance variables, what did we learn here? Instance variables are on class level. Instance variables, you are going to be able to call them once you create the object of the class. Otherwise, no. I didn't talk about the access modifiers. So as you see, you are able to achieve these instance variables in the same class. And also you are going to be able to achieve this outside of the class if you are calling them from another class. But you're not going to be able to achieve them another package, right? Since they're default is working like a protected, working like a protected. So there is, let me give you a clue. There is, so let's say public protected. I mean public protected, right? Private, private, and also default, right? Default. Okay, these are our access modifiers, but this is gonna be another topic of the video, right? Another topic of the video. So I'm not going to talk about it. But right now, if you're not providing any access modifiers, it is acting like a default. You can achieve inside of the class and also outside of the class within the same package. Okay, these are instance variables, right? Okay, but since we know how to create a method, right? Since we know how to create a method, and I'm gonna call it again sum, and I'm gonna create one method here, and which is gonna take two parameters, int a and int b, right? Okay, and I'm gonna create another one equals a plus b, right? Okay, a plus b, and then system.out.println, it is not returning anything, right? We are not returning anything, we're just printing out something here. Okay, so now I created a method, right? Oh my god, you think that we are going to be able to call this method too? v dot age name. Where is the sum? Here we go. Let's say 5 and 9. Okay, so print lane sum v dot. Okay, let's finish this. I'm gonna take it out, right? So we have created some, right, void integer a, and I mean it is taking two parameters, int a and int b. So whenever we call this method, right, whenever we call this method, it is going to print out something. This is what it is going to go. This is what it's gonna do, right? It is gonna sum the numbers, right? It's gonna sum the numbers. So what is the problem here? Remove argument, print line, change the print, change return the sum of the boolean. So what's happening here is you are saying that why are you putting in this in why are you putting it in system.out print line? It is saying that it's already printing out something. You don't need to, right? It is not returning anything. You don't need to. You can just directly call it, right? It is gonna do what it's supposed to do. It is gonna sum the values, right? 9 plus 5, it is gonna be 14. Okay, so we are able to actually call this method too. But how about the num, right? We dot. Do you see any num, right? Do you think that we are going to be able to call this num here? So this is, guys, this is our, what is it? This is our, actually, this is our local variables. So local variables supposed to be created inside of the constructor, inside of the method, block of code, right? Block of code. But the instance variables and the static variables, you have to create those outside of the method, block of code, constructor, right? Outside of the code, right? Outside of the code. You have to create those outside of the block of code, outside of the method, or outside of the block of code, right? Or the constructor, right? I'm going to talk about constructor too. So what's happening here is we are not going to be able to call these num variable outside of this block. Outside of this block, it is not reachable. But since we create the instance variables on the class level, we are going to be able to call them, right? We are going to be able to call them. So this is local variable. You cannot call it, but I can call it anywhere here, right? I can call it again. I can reassign it. Let's say this time C plus B. It's gonna be C plus B, but there is no B, right? There is no C. I mean, that's why it is complaining. So again, I'm assigning it here inside of this block of code. It is reachable, but outside it is not reachable, right? So okay, this is local variable, right? Okay, so let's go to the static variable. This is interesting. Static variables is actually, I like it. So how the static variables works? What variable I call static? So if there is a static keyword before the variable type, then that means it is static, right? So let's use the static keyword. Okay, use the static keyword and call it int. Let's see what variable Mike 8. Okay, call it string and give it a last name equals Lycos. Okay, so we created this time static variable. Static variable, right? So what is static variable, guys? Static variable, which is actually a keyword, right? If we are using static keyword for the instance variables, like if you are creating a static variable, then which means like you don't have to create an object of the class to be able to read this variable. You don't need to. You can just directly call it from anywhere, right? From anywhere, depending on the access modifiers. So here, what are we gonna do? Here, what are we gonna do? For example, the differentiation, right? So instance variables. Why am I using instance variables? Sometimes why am I using static variables? So instance variables are belong to the object. Whenever you create an object, you are going to be able to achieve it, right? But the static variables are belong to the class, and you are not going to be able to actually inherit them. So inheritance, object-oriented programming. There is four object-oriented programming. There is four main concepts, right? Inheritance, abstraction, inheritance, abstraction, and also the I think I forgot inheritance, abstraction, polymorphism, and also um, encapsulation, right? Okay, encapsulation. It's sometimes hard to remember, but this is the four concept and inheritance like a sub a parent class and a child class. So you're not going to be able to read this. You are not going to be able to inherit the static, right? Static is belong to the class. Okay, put this in your mind. So what's gonna happen with this static keyword? What's gonna happen? I'm gonna actually. So this is what can I do is so let's say I didn't create this, right? Let's say I didn't create any of these and I didn't call any object, any instance variables. So what I'm gonna do is I didn't create anything object of the class, right? So I'm just gonna call this last name. Oh, okay. I was like, what's it? Why it is complaining? Okay, last name, right? So it is not complaining right now because you don't have to create an object of the class if you are trying to reach the static variables, right? If I run this, it's gonna give me the my last name, right? It's gonna give me my last name, but you have to be careful. You have to be careful. So when I call it void uh, math, okay. So you have to be careful because you're not going to be able. So we cannot use non-static variables inside of the static variable, right? If I create here another, right, int uh, int num equals 19. So this is instance variable, not the static variable. So do you think that if I make this static, do you think that I'm going to be able to use this num here? Let's see. I mean, okay. So what is it gonna say? Surround with try-catch, change num to static. So you're not going to be able to use non-static variables inside of a static method, but you can use static variables, static variables inside of non-static method. As you guys see, now it is not complaining, right? So you cannot use non-static variables inside of a static method, but you can use static variables inside of a non-static method, right? So this is interesting. Okay, so we don't need to. Okay, again here I'm going to be able to call my num variable, right? You don't need to. You don't need to actually. Um, you don't need to. You don't need to create an object of it, right? You don't need to create an object of it. Okay. So this is all about it. We talked about instance variables, right? We talked about Java variable types, which is starting with the instance variables, and instance variables belong to the class, right? Belong to the object. Whenever you create an object, you are going to be able to achieve these variables, right? As long as it is going to be actually dependent, there is dependency, right? There is going to be a dependency uh, which is going to be depending on the access modifiers. Public, you can reach anywhere, and the protected, right? There is going to be some limitation. There is going to be limitation with class, the private and default, right? I'm gonna make a video about this too, and also, right, local variables. We talked about local variables, and local variables supposed to be created inside of the block of code method or constructor, and then we call them local variables. You are not going to be able to achieve these these variable this variable outside of the block of code method and constructor. And this, we talked about static variables. Static variables using the static keyword, making it static, and you are going to be able to achieve these variables, static variables, without creating an object of the class. This is the use of it. What is the use of static keyword? You are going to be able to call these variables without creating an object of the class, right? Object of the class, and you are not going to be able to use non-static variable inside of a static method, but you can use non-static variable, static variable inside of a non-static method, right? So you are not going to be able to use non-static variable inside of a static method, but you are going to be able to use static variables inside of a non-static method. I hope I'm not confusing you. I hope I said it right. It's actually hard to keep it that way. So and then we are able to actually, without creating an object of the class, we are able to achieve all the static variables inside of the same class. All right. Thank you very much for watching, and I see you guys in the next video. Please subscribe to my channel. I love you guys.